Hi, welcome again to Just for Farmers. I'm still here with Paul the Lord Harris. Paul, how you doing?
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Welcome.
Aye. And we're going to jump straight in with today's special expert guest. Now, this is a speaker and an expert, an authority, a thought leader on a very interesting subject. Up until, I would say, maybe 8 years ago, it might have been called a contrary or controversial subject. But these days, it's far more open. And I have to say that when I first met Rikki Arundel, I think that they might have possibly been the first open transgender speaker. And over that time, Rikki has proven to be an authority on the subject, a leading light on the subject, and not afraid to stand up for what is right. Immense amount of respect for the work that Rikki does. Rikki, welcome to Just for Farmers.
And before Ricky says anything, I'm going to come in here and say, if any of you are listening, thinking, "Oh, right, let's just turn that one off." As somebody who works in this industry, I really encourage you to listen to what we're going to talk about this morning, because I think Ricky's got a lot of important information to share with us. Many of us are challenged with how do we get more people into our industry. I think it's worth you listening to them this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, because it could be one of the absolute things that unlocks a greater diversity in your business, but also access to people that you're not even considering right now.
Indeed. Rikki, welcome.
I'm pleased to be here. Very pleased to be here.
So, tell us a little bit. Give us like a 2-minute potted history of Rikki Arundel.
Okay, so I'm going to admit straight away I'm not a farmer, but I spent most of my childhood up until about the age of 8. Well, certainly a childhood before I sort of went to secondary school. Most of my friends were kids who lived on farms. I lived in a village pub in a small Wiltshire village. My dad used to drive for Wiltshire farmers, taking meal around to various different places. And I used to go with him on lots of those events. And I've got memories of trying to collect conkers from a field and being chased by bulls and all sorts of things that happen when you live in the country.
That still goes on, I think.
And it probably still does. Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I learned, I think, when I grew up, was that you don't have many secrets. It's very hard to be anonymous when you live in a small community. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows what everybody's doing. And I, of course, growing up very secretly transgender. I knew at the age of 6 that I was trans. By the time I was 8, I was cross-dressing. I'd been to child psychiatrist to try and figure out why I didn't get on with other kids. But it was the fact I didn't get on with boys. But back then, we're talking the 1950s, and we even had separate entrances in the schools, a boys' entrance and a girls' entrance. Segregation was so great. So it was very difficult for me to comfortably find the relationships. I've always just had one friend, and they were nearly always considered weird by everybody else. I think probably I was. But I grew up in an environment, so I know how difficult it was. And when I finally, at the age of 50, decided I was going to come out, one of the first things I did was to go to university and do a master's degree in gender, because I found I had to develop a new expertise. I'd been in sales and marketing technology and very male dominated. Nobody wanted to know me. Going there, and I started to really sort of understand some of the challenges about when I did my dissertation, I decided to do a research-based dissertation and interview and talk to trans people and find out, what the phases they'd gone through, how they coped with childhood, how they coped with cross-dressing, how they coped with actually coming out and living. And it was interesting. 2 or 3 of the people I interviewed had also come from rural backgrounds, and their stories were all very similar. Incredibly hard to be themselves, having to hide all the time. I remember at the age of 8, I had a young boy who was a friend of mine, same age, but he was in a very big family, 11 kids. And he obviously, being a middle child, got lots and lots of hand-me-down clothes, which would have been okay were it not for the fact that most of his older siblings were sisters. So he ended up with a few clothes that were, verging on. Well, came to school one day wearing a pair of girls' underwear and forgotten that we were doing cross-country running. So he's getting changed. One of the other boys spotted it. Oh, it was like a scene out of Lord of the Flies. Everybody jumped in. They're jeering. They're laughing. They're mocking him. And he was just frozen. And me, I'm standing there thinking, I cross-dress. I like wearing cross clothes. I daren't tell anyone. And it was at that point I knew this had to be a secret. No one could know. I couldn't tell my mum, my dad, my parents. No one could know about my secret. And it stayed that way. By the time I was 50, I think I had actually told 4 people in my life. And there were, people that had relationships or one very close friend. And I think that's the danger that you have when it's not like, living in Manchester or living in London where you can pop down to a gay bar that's just 10 miles away and you're completely anonymous. Nobody knows who you are. Nobody's going to catch you. You can't just hop into the gay bars. You can't. And I think the problem for farmers as well is this thing that you can't just think, well, I'll just pop to Manchester for the weekend, because who's going to milk the cows? Who's going to feed the animals? You can't just get away from it. And I think this is the point. We lived in a pub, same thing. If we wanted to go away, somebody had to run the pub. So, and it's that's the challenge. So, there's a little bit of a potted history of some of my that's relevant to this. So,
so what are you doing now? What's Rikki doing now?
And why are you doing it? Yeah,
a little tiny bit older now. Still trying to look young, but I've got a lot of skills and I can help people, particularly people who are interested in making speeches that want to make a difference and change attitudes, because I've had my experience running social enterprises, being an LGBTQ activist, and I got very heavily involved in that at university. So I can help people make a difference through speaking. So I do a lot more of that. I still do LGBTQ events. I'm doing Pride events in Amsterdam at the moment this week, and but I don't leave here.
So what's driving you now? What drives you now?
Oh.
I've never known Rikki lost for words. Never known Rikki lost for words there.
I'm going to tell you this. One of the things that happens to us, and David will immediately be able to feel this, is as a speaker, we get to hear an awful lot of speeches.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to hear an awful lot of pretty grim, awful speeches. And often we're the only professional speaker in the entire day. And everybody, and we're the closing speaker, or we're the main headline speaker. And we listen to the chief executive and the finance director and the sales director go boringly on and on with no real ability to speak. And it's probably a presentation somebody else produced for them and handed to them. And I think, why can't people just learn how to captivate audiences and actually inspire them to make a change? So that's my goal. Helping people to change the world one speech at a time. That's what drives me. I want to help people to be able to deliver a speech, whatever that is. If it's if it's because it's some campaign that you're on, or some mission, or just you want to get your business a little bit more motivated, well, that's it.
I've got a quick question for you, Rikki. Which there's a lot of language used these days that I think, especially middle-aged white men who spend a lot of time in a tractor in a field, they've heard the language, but they don't actually know what it means. So what does transgender mean?
Our world has become increasingly binary. It's men and women, and that's it. If you look at other cultures across the world over thousands of years, they've always had a middle ground, a middle area. I don't quite know why it happens, but somehow something happens during fetal development and our brain gets wired up. Most people, the wiring is actually works with the physical body. You've got a male body, you feel male, everything's okay. You've got a female body, you feel female, and you're happy where you are. There's a small number of us that just don't fit into that in some way or other. And I'm actually going to broaden that out, and that's probably controversial what I'm going to say. I'm talking about the whole LGBT community. In some way, their gender doesn't fit, either because they prefer people of the same sex. And even if you look at the gay community, some of them are very masculine looking. Some of them you just think, well, they're just a straight guy. And others, oh, they're lovely in the camp and Alan Carr lookalikes, and they don't know why they've got this very effeminate and think, but that's how they are. And some of them are very feminine. I've got some young trans people I did some work with. We said, I'm going to go back to being gay because I can't get a boyfriend if I'm trans. And so that was it. So they said, I can still wear dresses, still wear skirts, still wear anything I want to wear, but I can pull boys because they'll pull gay boys. So some of it's simply about how do I find a community that's actually going to work for me? So a lot of trans people shift completely. They go completely and totally to becoming, female when they were male or male. And if I show you pictures of trans men who've taken testosterone for 3 or 4 years and been working out in the gym, you'd think, no way, it could never have been women.
Yeah.
And then you see people like Paris Lees, who's a very well-known trans woman, stunningly beautiful woman. Janet Mock.
Why do you think there's so much difficulty for some people to accept the LGBTQ plus community per se? What's the barrier? And then particularly thinking of the industry that I'm in, the agricultural industry, why do you think, what is it? There's a word I've got in my head which I don't want to use.
No, I'm going to go. I'll tell you this. Part of the problem for trans women is that straight men are terrified that they're going to fancy me. They're going to fancy someone who's...
Yeah, that's what we both said. Fear.
Fear. Oh,
Fear. Yeah.
All fear. Big fear. All the time.
But what's the fear about, do you think, Rikki? That other than what you've just said, what do you think, why do we fear, as a society, the LGBTQ plus community, do you think?
I think a lot of men are terrified that if they go into a gay bar, someone's going to try and chat them up and want to have sex with them, because that's what they would do if they went into a bar with women. And they're assuming that that's going to happen to them. Someone's going to try and pull them, and it's probably might happen. Somebody might come up who fancies them, and it terrifies them, the idea. There's a possibility that they suddenly might feel that they respond to that. I thought I was straight all my life. I knew I was transgender, but I thought in terms of sexuality, I was straight. And then I met a couple of guys and some trans women and really fancied them. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm gay as well. And this is where you start to realize that there's not clear pockets. You're not just gay or just straight. And the thing that's happening with younger people, and this is something that's really important, 25%, and I literally just read this morning, looking at some stuff, 25% of under 40-year-old farmers identify as LGBTQ.
Say that again.
25%.
Wow.
Of young people in the farming community who are under 40 identify as LGBTQ in some way. They don't identify as straightforward men, women. And that's the younger, and it's particularly strong we're seeing in Generation Z, which is the under 25-year-olds. That's just growing. But anybody under 40 is either Generation Z or millennials. So all of them now are growing up in a world where being LGBTQ is okay. It's cool.
But why is it still not why is it still not okay, though? Sometimes at work, people will say, oh, I don't know how to deal with somebody who's trans, or I've got farming clients who have had staff with them that are transitioning, and they don't really know how to deal with it. So I guess help us a little bit, Rikki.
Because they're living in a community where everybody's hiding it. The fact that people are identifying as LGBTQ doesn't mean they're out.
Yeah.
They may be gay, but they don't tell anyone, and they may not tell anybody in the local community because it's just too difficult. So they'll go and leave. So what we see is lots of, and again, I've been reading this, quite a few young gay farmers. The big challenge, I think, that people don't understand for farmers is that there's this desire to keep the farm in the family,
Hmm.
for it to pass on from generation to generation. So suddenly somebody is gay, maybe the oldest son, and thinks, well, I'm not going to have kids. What's going
Yeah.
to happen to the farm if I take over? Would it be better to let the farm go to a younger brother or even a sister who's married and takes it on, where they can have a family who will grow up on the farm and take over the farm and keep it in the family? And they get drawn, they go to university, they get drawn into the LGBT community in a city, and suddenly they like the city life. Others can't stand the city life because they're born on a farm. They want to go back to it. But I think I do find actually it was interesting looking at some of the farming websites this morning. There are one or two where they're mostly full of half-naked men showing themselves. I thought, okay, that's a slightly different thought to what I was having.
And is that perhaps the perception that the agricultural community would have about LGBTQ, that it's actually just gay people, and it's broader than that, isn't it? It's broader than
Is a lot broader than that, and
yeah.
I think we've seen evidence of of two women running farms for a long time, but it was always, oh, well, they're just friends, they're just sisters. We tended never to acknowledge and accept that these two women might actually be in a relationship. They might actually be partners. Two men running a farm, we tend to think, well, they often be brothers or um,
Yeah.
it's. I think we tend to try and dismiss it and bury it and think, well, let's not talk about it.
And is it important to talk about it, do you think?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, because I think, yeah, but you talked about the alarming statistic, really, that 25% of under 40-year-olds, don't necessarily identify with one particular gender or another. Yeah, again, I'm just thinking for farmers, how do we help them to work with either their own children potentially or members of staff on the farm that
There
are
is a
struggling for identity?
there's a gay helpline run by Keith Innocent that I came across, and one of the things I read there was that I, I don't want to get the story wrong, but the story there is about somebody who was in an accident, and father came and rescued him, and later discovered his son was gay and said, if I'd known he was gay, I wouldn't have saved him.
Gosh.
Wow.
And there is that level of we're still hanging over. I mean, I was 17 when we decriminalized homosexuality in this country, and more people were arrested for being gay after that decriminalization than before, because the rule said you had to be over the age of 21, and it had to be no. Basically, it just said it had to be in private. The courts interpreted that as being no one else in the building. So if you met up with somebody in a hotel room, there were other people in the building. So the hotels would phone the police, who'd then come and raid the room because two men had gone to share a room. And if they caught them in bed, that was it. They could be arrested and imprisoned.
So I think it's fair to say we've moved on, thankfully,
Only
massively at that
just.
stage. But that's my next point really was how much further have we got to go before the LGBTQ community feel they can be themselves in the workplace, do you think?
Well, this month is Pride Month, and Pride Month is about celebration. It used to be about arguing for rights. Now it's about celebration. It's about inviting the cisgender and straight community to come and join us in the park or wherever, have some fun, see the parades, see the drag queens, talk to drag, find out actually we're just ordinary people who actually are a bit more colourful than the average, and we like fun and rainbow flags. It's just
You,
and
you say that, Ricky. When I was 17, 18 years of age, I was your heterosexual, testosterone-ridden bloke in Birmingham. And I worked in the catering and hospitality industry, an industry quite renowned to have a very high proportion of
yeah,
LGBT plus community in them. And I felt quite intimidated at this one place in particular, because in a team of nearly 100 staff, I was one of three people who were straight. But they took me out clubbing one Thursday night. And I got to put my hands up to this. I'd been to this club the week before, and it was your fairly typical nightclub. Went there with these guys. Oh, what a party! And what a party! Yeah, the gay community, they know how to party. But the reason I'm saying that is because sometimes we don't need to be educated. Sometimes we need to be pushed out of our comfort zone
Yes.
to learn these things. And there is a demographic of people who say, well, I don't want any part of this. I'm just going to sit in my castle, smoke my pipe, and hope it goes away. But actually, it is coming, whether people want it or not, and it's about embracing it rather than resisting it. Now, in the last, and you might tell me I'm wrong here, but what I've seen and heard is in the last, I would say, 7 or 8 years in particular, there's been an explosion of change in terms of gender diversity, sexuality, and so many people don't have their heads around this. Why has there been this explosion? Is it social media? Is it communication and media? What's caused this?
The tipping point in terms of the transgender community, and it's trans that have been heavily in the highlight. Drag queens have been drawn into it as well. Not so much pressure against the gay community. Caitlyn Jenner was the tipping point. All of a sudden, we had a big A-list celebrity come out, was made the spokesperson for the LGBT community, despite the fact that the LGBT community didn't want her being so. Partly because she's a big Trump supporter and a Republican, and the LGBT community tends to be a bit more left. And Caitlyn Jenner has even admitted she's had more flack for being a Trump supporter than being LGBTQ. But what happened was then Glamour magazine made her Woman of the Year, and she accepted it. Bad mistake. The radical feminists went nuts about this because they've always had a bit of a problem about, because they're fighting hard for women's rights, and all of a sudden they see men coming in and taking them. And then suddenly we start seeing 1 or 2 trans women who are sports personalities, doing well in sports. Oh my God, they're taking it away from women. It's all become a bit toxic, and on top of that, then we've had some religious movements in the States, with some very, very, heavily focused religious movements in the States, arguing that all these trans people going into women's toilets are just perverts that are standing around. Well, they're not. I go into the toilets because it's safer for me to go in female toilets than men's toilets. If I go into men's toilets, I'm almost certainly going to stand out and get myself in all kinds of trouble. So if I go into female toilets, I can use them, come out, wash my hands, get out, and that's the end of it. I don't make a spectacle. If I go to the gym, I use female toilets, use private cubicle, get myself changed, go into the gym or go into the swimming pool. I just want to blend in. Most trans people want to blend in, but there are some people who don't like it. And they're very vocal, and they've managed to reach some very powerful people in government, particularly Badenoch and I was going to say Cruella Braverman, but I'll say Suella Braverman just to keep it, and also Rishi Sunak. And quite a few of these politicians are being caught up in this idea that it's all about sex. It's about what sex you are. Well, you have no idea what sex I am. You know because I've told you that I'm transgender, but I could be a woman with a deep voice. There are plenty of women who have quite deep voices. I think, you've got bigger hands. They're just visible signs that suggest I might have been born male, but they don't say I was. I have a gender recognition certificate. I have a passport. I have a driving license. I have all sorts of things that say I'm female. We don't allow non-binary in this country yet. About 14 countries do, but we still don't. But we decided we were going to stop conversion therapy, trying to turn people being to straight or get rid of this thing because it's some kind of mental illness. The evidence is fairly clear from all the professionals and all the work that's been done over years and years and years that being gay, being trans, being lesbian is not a lifestyle choice. We don't choose to be this. God's sake, this is not a path that anybody would have thought, yeah, I know what I'll do. Let's change gender, wear different clothes, and get the shit beaten out of me.
Yes.
Basis. That is not. That's not a choice I would have made. And certainly at the age of 50, I knew when I did, it literally stopped my career dead in its tracks.
I was going to ask you, how has it affected your work life?
Yes, I certainly would have been a lot. I could have been a lot more successful if I'd not changed gender.
So do
I
you
ended
think,
up having to
what does the future look like then? So again, particularly in the world of work, in terms of how we're going to
right. I think
overcome some of these things.
what needs to happen now is that particularly larger organizations are beginning to realize that if they have an inclusive organization, it's more profitable.
Yes, exactly.
And there's no question about that. Companies that are inclusive have proved that they are more profitable simply by the fact that they don't have the same high level of turnover of staff. They actually are able to tap into the creativity because, for example, we know that the average IQ of somebody who is trans is about 1 or 2% higher than the normal average. So there's also a high level of incidence of autism amongst the trans community. So we know it's all something to do with what's going on in the brain. We aren't clear because we can't look. And you can't sort of poke in, have a little look at what's going on in the brain. You can use an MRI scan, it'll tell you something. You can wait someone's dead and slice it all up and have a look. And we can find out something about it, but we don't really know. We're dealing with the human brain and it's a mystery in the main.
So
But
are you confident?
organizations become much more inclusive, visibly inclusive, and I'm going to give 4 things that people can do to become inclusive in a second. What that starts to do is send a message out to everybody that it's okay. That you're not going to get picked on. Your work, you're going to get treated equally at work. You're going to get the same opportunities to, to build your career. We'll tap into the creativity and we'll add that diversity. And it's not just trans, is it? I mean, it's all the people who are neurodiverse who aren't being getting employed. The people who are disabled who could work effectively but are not being employed properly. It's the women who are not getting jobs that they could easily do and would like to do because people perceive them as not good enough, not as good as men. And so it's that whole issue of diversity. And yeah, of course, the farming community relies massively on migrants. It always has done, and migrants that move around the world from country to country to be at the right places for harvesting in different times of the year. At the moment, in the UK, we've blocked that, and I know that Lincolnshire fruit farms are having huge problems because they just cannot get enough people to come and work on the farms. So once you become inclusive, then it opens up everybody's thinking, it's okay, I can go and work there. I'll be fine. And I had this look around some of the organization. There's an organization called AgRespect, which is online that is doing an enormous amount of work to help promote LGBT inclusion within the agricultural community. I typed into the search LGBT on a large manufacturer, an agricultural college, and I can't remember the other one. Is another one I looked at. Nothing. Absolutely nothing came up on the website at all. Nothing about their policies, nothing, not the term LGBTQ or LGBT didn't exist on their website. So,
have we still got quite a long way to go? And I'm interested to hear your
I think so. It's about people being openly inclusive.
So if you think of, because David said that there's been this explosion, let's call it an explosion of awareness, and certainly media's helped that, and events like Pride are growing and becoming bigger. So there's definitely been that move, but it hasn't yet maybe translated, I think what you're saying, into the workplace yet.
As our politics have become a little bit right, in the UK, very right, it's actually created a backlash from people. And it's almost like the government's attitude against trans has almost said to the world, hey, it's okay to discriminate again. You can say what you want. If you go on Quora, the site that basically just questions, some of the stuff on there, I think somebody put a comparison between Nazis and trans activists showing how they were the same. And I thought, why are we doing this? We are just people.
So, as an optimist, which I am, I'm fairly convinced that I love this phrase at the moment, the silent majority. It's used by politicians of all parties. We're talking for the silent majority. I do feel, and I hope actually, as somebody who's 60 next year, that the next generation will be more tolerant and will be more understanding, and I believe that they will be, and sometimes see through the prejudices that they're being shown, the extremes.
Generation Z is ignoring them. They're just
exactly. So I think there is hope, and I love the fact you talked about inclusivity equals profitability from a business perspective, because it gives us those organisations that are more inclusive, and thinking about farms again, those farms that are looking at people who maybe they may not have considered before. I mean, somebody comes for an interview and they're clearly dressed differently. There are bound to be those prejudices still there, but it's about seeing beyond that. I think what you're saying, beyond how the person is dressed or how their hair might be presented, and actually talking to the person underneath. Because we did this 20 years ago with females. There was that whole transition. We had to start looking beyond the gender. And it's almost like we've gone backwards, almost come full circle. We're looking at gender again.
We have gone a bit backwards at the moment.
Yeah. So what are the 4 things? You mentioned there were 4 things.
Okay. Number 1 is you need to have, within your organization, even if it's a small organization, clear statement of equality policy. Yeah. And it doesn't need to be written by someone with a university degree. If you've got a small organization, get your staff to help write it. Get them to actually say, this is how we want to be treated. This is what's going on. And the policy needs to be written almost as if it's a statement from the chief executive saying, fine, we're an inclusive organization. Okay, we accept people for who they are, and we're not going to judge anybody, and we will not tolerate harassment, discrimination within the workplace. Yeah, that kind of thing that just says, we accept everybody. If you want to work here, you need to accept that that's our philosophy, or you don't work here.
Okay, it's number 1.
The second one is that you need to be seen to be LGBT inclusive.
How do we do that?
We've got Pride. Pride's taking place all over the country. Get involved. Have a little stall at the stand. If you're a farm, well, go and sell some farm. Set up a stall selling some farm produce on there, or combine with a couple of other people or something. Do something that says we're part of the community and we love the LGBT community. Run, if you're a smaller organization, you can do, film nights, LGBTQ film nights, LGBT trivia nights. There's a whole variety of different things. I see that IKEA is getting a lot of flack at the moment from the negative people because they've said rainbow cakes are back in the cafe for June. So there it is. It's back in the food. What can you do to make things look a bit, if you've got a farm shop, dress it up a little bit with a few rainbow flags and a bit of bunting, just that says, hey, not we've put a flag on it. It's got to be a little bit more than that. It's got to be, we really do embrace and we are inclusive. So be seen to be. If you've got literature, have some, gay couples on it, and just make sure that LGBTQ, as well as people of color and everything else, make sure diversity is in your DNA. It's part of what you promote to the world, that says we are an inclusive company. We accept people. Have people in wheelchairs and things on it. It's not about being woke. It's actually about saying everybody's in one minority or another. Even white men are becoming a minority.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking, we're getting into it. We'll hear your 3rd and 4th, but we're getting into identity here, and for our sins, we're supporters of a particular football club. That's right. An identity. We won't say which football club it is, will we, Dave? But it's an identity, and it's just another identity. So what's your 3rd and 4th, Rikki?
So number 3 is basically just do some training.
Yeah.
And it's not about the danger with the training is that it's just the LGBT stuff that come. You've got to make it. I think you've got to make it mandatory so that everybody has to come along and do it. Bring in outside speakers. That's the sort of thing that I do quite a lot, is going in and doing it. You can do it online. You can get someone to do something and then put it on your website so that or on your internal website so that it's available for others. But get a level of training and education about different minority groups so that all people in the organization get to understand what does it mean to be trans, what does it mean to be gay, to be lesbian, and what's the lifestyles. And it's really about just understanding people.
I heard somebody say that you're either tolerant or you're intolerant.
Mm.
What is it?
Yeah.
And that that whoa, you could see some people just go, wow, I don't want to be intolerant. And yeah, it's fascinating, this stuff. Go on then.
And number 4?
What's number 4?
Call out homophobia, transphobia, discrimination and harassment. Call it out.
Yeah.
If somebody, and I think people have got to understand that telling a joke about somebody who's gay or somebody who's trans or somebody who's Muslim or whatever, it may be very funny, and it maybe you do it. You think, well, there's nobody here in those groups, but you don't know. You don't know if somebody is secretly gay or if they've got a trans parent or grandparent or child. Lots of people I know suddenly tell me, "Oh yeah, my son, my daughter's transgender," and I think, "Oh wow." And so a lot of people are hiding their support for it, but it's just part of their family. Some of my family don't want to talk to me anymore because they are so afraid of discrimination by stigmatization by association.
That's really, really helpful. So to summarize, the 4 things, if we're out there listening, particularly as a business owner, is have an equality policy, do something that shows that you're inclusive, do some training, so learn about it rather than prejudging it, and call it out when you see those prejudices. And there's a fantastic 4 tips for us. And one of the things that I've found really helpful here, and the phrase I've written down is, generally speaking, understanding reduces fear. And we've talked a lot today about fear and fear of difference and people being different to us. And maybe it's the tolerance thing, Dave.
Yeah.
If we take the time to understand the subject matter first, it will generally reduce the fear of those differences. Would you agree, Rikki?
I do, yeah. The thing about fear is the number one fear is shame. We used to think it was public speaking, but it's not. Because the only thing that's going to happen for public speaking is that you make a fool of yourself. You're shamed. And if you listen to Brené Brown and any of her TED talk, which is brilliant on this, we are afraid of being shamed, being laughed at, being ridiculed, being the butt of jokes. And that's the fear that people have. If I associate with this trans person, this gay person, people will laugh at me. And we don't come out because we think, oh, people will laugh at me. And I've even got a video of young kids being asked, can boys wear girl clothes? No, why? People will laugh at me.
So, Rikki, before I close out with one last question for you, if people want to genuinely understand a little bit more about this, where should they go to, or how can they get hold of you if it's appropriate?
Okay, well, almost everything about mine now is moving on to my Speakers Academy website. The 2 topics will be on there about speaking and about LGBTQ. Obviously, Stonewall is a particularly good site, stonewall.co.uk. Huge amount of resource and information there. Yeah, it's worth looking at AgRespect and a couple of others. I was quite surprised at how much information there is on online at the moment about LGBTQ and agriculture. So just typing that into Google brings up quite a lot of different that you'd mentioned in an email. What was her name? Amy Burke.
Yeah.
Who's been doing a huge amount of work on this. So there are a lot of people trying to tackle within the agricultural community this general problem.
So I'm going to take you back to something you said fairly early on, which is on one of the sites you were researching for today, you found a figure that suggested that 25% of people in the agricultural farming industry are gay.
Under 40.
Under 40.
Under 40. Now, if somebody watching this or listening to this is one of those farm workers, or indeed a farmer, the owner of the business, who's sitting there thinking, well, I've got 6 or 7 people in my team here, so statistically 1 or 2 of them may well be, and they're scared. How should they deal with this tomorrow morning in the yard?
Ooh.
I know. Forgive me, mate. I ask all.
No, that was quite interesting because you've just got a small team. It's not something you can sort of do overnight. This, I think, if you do things too rapidly, it almost smacks a little bit of, oh, is this just sort of being done for show?
Yeah. Or
I
even if
think,
it's a tone they should have, or
I think
what should they do?
if they can start to look, as it's Pride Month, this is a good time to start thinking, is there something I can do to get involved or get engaged with an upcoming LGBTQ Pride? Most of them haven't happened yet. They're going to be happening throughout mostly in the UK. It's mostly July, August is the other big Pride months. It starts at the end of June, but there'll be lots and lots of small Pride events going on. Some of them, if they've got they might need basically a tractor and a trailer so they can put a bit of a something on the back to go through the Pride. Yeah. There are all sorts of ways in which the agricultural community can get involved. The food processing industry can get involved because it's about people.
So if you're out there now, you're listening to this and you're thinking this, I may have somebody in my team. Where do I start? How do I start? I wrote down 2 words, which is almost a theme we've had for today's recordings. Be kind.
Yeah.
Just be kind first. Before we judge, before we jump in and before we make judgments about people, if we start off by being kind to each other, it might sound a bit cheesy, maybe, but isn't that?
I finish all my presentations with one statement. That's the basic principles behind the United Nations equality movement, and it's treat everyone with dignity and respect.
Rikki, you have been an absolute star. You've been so generous, both of your expertise and of your personal story. Thank you so much indeed for helping farmers today. Really appreciate it.
Great to meet you. Thanks, Rikki.
Now we're going to have a really short piece from James, the Body Fix coach. Something that'll help your well-being. But remember, it's advisable to speak to your doctor before you start any significant exercise regime. Enjoy. Here we are with James again in the cowshed, about to do some more exercises. What's this one for, James?
Okay, so we looked at the pulling part, obviously where we're pulling upon the tractors, but obviously we've got to take a big step up as well to get into that tractor normally, right? So you can strengthen those muscles up. If you've got something you can step up on, maybe that's the stairs at home, or you can find a nice big box in your farm area. But we're going to have a look at a single leg step up exercise. So again, it's trying to get the right muscles firing, so then those muscles get stronger. So we're always looking at improving movement first and then building strength after. So for a single leg step up, I'm going to place one leg up on top of a box. I want to get my heel in line with my knee, and ideally the hip is at about knee height on this. Again, I'm going to go through my same procedures again. I'm taking a nice deep breath into my core. I'm keeping my chest up nice and tall. So I want to think about elevators going up and elevators coming down on this. Okay, so that's my cue. I want to drive all the force through my heel that is up on the box rather than being in the toes. Okay, so when I step up, pushing through the heel, elevators going straight up. Okay?
So put the one foot up, keep the foot flat.
Yep.
And so you're pushing through the heel rather than the sole and the toes.
Absolutely. So if my weight's in my heel's in line with my knee, the biomechanics of the body are going to work a lot better. Okay. So I'm going to step up again. I'm looking for control. What you may find happening is the knee start to dip in and out. So that's just knee valgus. So it just indicates that one of the muscles in the quads isn't quite strong enough. So this exercise will help it. I'm going to drive up through that heel, keep the chest nice and tall. The elevator's going up. I'm coming to the top. I'm touching down with my other foot. And now on the way down, I want to do the same thing again. I want to try and keep the weight in my heel, and I'm going to try and control it down a little bit more this time as I come down, rather than just dropping straight down on the floor. So I'm pushing up through my heel, I come to the top, nice tall chest, elevator's going back down, so I'm trying to keep the weight in the heel, and I'm coming down nice and slowly, trying to get some good solid work through my quads, or the thighs, whatever you want to call them. Typically, hitting between 5 and 10 repetitions per leg, and that's the single leg step up.
And I remember the first time you did that exercise with me in my house.
Yep,
and I hadn't walked up and down stairs free of pain in about 2.5 years, and that exercise has really made the stairs more comfortable for me. I'm thinking about all the farmers out there who are suffering with knee, lower and upper back problems, and is this a prevention or a cure?
Can be both.
Okay.
It can be both. Obviously, you need to understand what's going on within the body first and why things aren't working in a particular way. What we see a lot of the time happening is compensation patterns throughout the body. So certain muscles have taken over other muscles' jobs. They're getting tired quickly. Joints start to hurt because their muscles are overworking, etc. Okay.
And this box particularly is probably about 18 inches, 20 inches tall. Would you suggest that they start with something a bit
Absolutely, yeah.
smaller?
I mean, you can start with something smaller just to get the movement right first, and then build up as you go. It's just figuring out how obviously what works for you at that time, giving you the right sort of height on the box, or the right weight, or whatever that is with your exercises.
And if people are sore or in pain, how do they know when they should stop?
So we've got two types of pain:
Go on.
good pain
Yeah.
and bad pain. So
We're not being kinky here, James. Just like, what's the good pain then?
So good pain is generally just from moving and exercise. It tends to disappear after a day or so. We get that DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, where lactic acid is formed in the system, etc., and our body's got to get rid of it. Bad pain is normally a pain that will last for days, weeks, even months. It's not going away. It's making your life worse. You're not sleeping right. You're not being able to do your job right. So you should really go get that looked at.
Go to the doctor.
Yes.
Stop being, or come and see James.
That's right.
Either way, stop being proud. Pain is not something to be proud of. It can really limit your effectiveness on the farm.
Absolutely. A lot of people try and push through pain, hoping it's going to go away, but more often than not, it's not going to go away. So seek medical advice.
So work out what your good pain is, what your bad pain is, and if it's bad, do something about it, people. Thanks, James.
Thanks, David.
Are you worried? Most people worry about something or many things. And I find farmers in particular, Paul, to be really good at finding solutions to problems. But actually, after their second glass of wine or their third beer, it becomes evident that there's lots going on that they worry about because they don't feel it's within their control or ability to sort out.
Very much so, Dave. I think, one of the things that we do face in agriculture in the UK and really across the world is a lot of things that are coming at us that can cause us to worry. And I guess it's that whole start point of what's within our control and what isn't in our control. And often is it true that and I think perhaps myself as well, sometimes you can tend to worry more about the things that are outside your control, paradoxically, than the ones that are inside your control, whether it's government policy or climate change, and we'll perhaps talk about those in terms of resilience on another session. But we often worry about the things that actually there's no point in worrying about. Would that be true, do you think?
I think that is true. And my elderly father was an engineer and in his youth, and he was very pragmatic in his thinking. The older he got, the more he worried about minutiae. And the only thing I could ever do to try and help him handle that was to beg him to consider that what he's doing is hypothesizing. He's making all sorts of assumptions. Well, if we do that, that'll probably happen, won't it? And and that'll probably happen, won't it? I says, well, if you're going to make assumptions in a negative context, therefore it's only right that you should hypothesize and make assumptions. What if it doesn't go wrong? What if it does work? Because if you're going to stress about something that you're not in control of at all, it's only fair that you should consider the positive side as well. Otherwise, what we are doing, and forgive me, don't shoot the messenger, is we are responsible for our own misery. How's that working as a plan?
Yeah, it's not cool. In fact, interesting you talk about hypothesizing, I think was the way you described it.
It's a big word for a Brummie, though.
It is. I mean, getting my teeth
word.
in this morning. And even the word worry is not a good word for us Brummies, because it sounds like, would I?
Would I?
But if you can bear with us with our Birmingham accents, one of the things that I think we often also go a stage further than that is we catastrophize. We actually go as far as the whole, we take it down a couple of levels, particularly if we are the personality styles where we're prone to that overthinking. And again, we think about often if we're working on a tractor in a field all day, we can be by ourselves without anything to interrupt that thought pattern. So very quickly, a concern or an observation can become a concern, can become a big concern, becomes a worry, then becomes a potential disaster, and then suddenly it's a catastrophe.
True.
And by the end of it, by the time
True.
we get back to we're taking the tractor back into the buildings and parking it up for the night, the farm's going to go, my family are all going to leave me, it's going to be an absolute disaster. So we've got to be careful, haven't we, how we just catch ourselves sometimes going down that route.
And that is exactly the right way to look at it, Paul. We must start to catch ourselves doing things wrong, but then start catching ourselves doing things right.
Yeah.
If it's difficult for you, maybe as you listen to this, actually, maybe I'm kind of a negative or a pessimistic or a skeptical or, God forbid, cynical mindset. Well, that's okay. A lot of people are. But what we can do is start catching ourselves doing something right and reward ourselves for that. But if that's a challenge for you, how can I start thinking positive, Dave? Well, okay, here's one. Set your phone to silently vibrate in your pocket every hour on the hour. And when you feel it vibrate, do two things. One, just go... Because why wouldn't you? That sounded a bit like Peter Griffin, didn't it? The second thing is, when you feel the phone vibrate, for the next 2 or 3 minutes, whatever you do, if you're in the tractor, if you're walking the fields, if you're sitting in the office, press pause, and just for the next couple of minutes, think of things you have some gratitude for. What actually in your life do you have to be grateful for?
Crikey, a gratitude vibration approach. What a great idea. And again, if you're sitting there thinking, God, this is that fluffy stuff that those two Brummy guys are talking about. This is not fluffy. This is proven psychology in terms of we could bore you with the chemical reaction that will happen in your system. Yeah. When you start to think about negative thoughts, it kicks out all the fear chemicals, all the fear responses. When we start to think about positive things, it puts a different set of chemicals like dopamine, feel good chemicals. Why would you not want to pump your body with feel-good chemicals? No, we're not living in a world of Pollyanna where everything's pink and fluffy. We know there are days. Oh yes, sorry to disappoint you, Dave. Where there is the real world out there where we know we've got things coming at us all the time. There could be personal things as well as macro things happening in the economy and what's happening with the farm. What we're really trying to help you with here is just a little antidote to some of that. And I love the idea of the vibration gratitude moment where your phone vibrates and you just take a couple of minutes to be grateful for what you've got. Because without sounding, and this session could be full of cliches, without sounding really cliche that somebody else has got it worse than me, they have. Somewhere in the world, somewhere has got it a lot worse than you. So this worry thing where we end up catastrophizing and it's all going to be a disaster and I'll lose my farm starts normally with a small thought of, the machine's not working properly today, the parlour stopped working, the cows aren't milking like they should be, some staff have been late, and you go over and over that in your mind, and suddenly the whole thing's a complete disaster. I wish I'd never started farming. I'm going to sell the cows, I'm going to sell my tractors, and we're going to go and build some tents in a field somewhere. It's that stopping that process, isn't it? And your gratitude idea is likely to do that, Dave. If you've got that gratitude going on a regular basis, are we less likely to go down that route of catastrophizing?
Absolutely. Which path do you take, the left or the right? And one's thinking positive, one's thinking negative. If anyone thinks all things positive is fluffy, woolly nonsense, like Paul joked about earlier, well, how is catastrophizing over stuff you're making up working for you then? Isn't that just as fluffy, but in a really bad way? So if we're going to make stuff up, why don't we choose the happier stuff? It's wow. So let's consider this. In a few podcasts ago, for those who were listening to the first series, we talked about what we can do to manage our worry, our stress, and I introduced to you 3 letters, C, S, and A, and they stand for control, security, and acceptance. Now, whatever's worrying you is either triggering 1, 2, or all 3 of those things. So instead of a million things stressing you out and causing you worry and distress, ask yourself, what is the main root of this? Is it a desire for more control?
Or losing control.
Or fear of losing control? Is it a desire for more, or a fear, a lack of security? Or is it a fear or of a lack of, or desiring more acceptance and approval from people? Because then, instead of it being, that's a problem, I don't know what to do, you go, what can I do right now to get more approval, take more control, feel more secure? You do something, and you guys are great at pragmatic thinking. So all of a sudden it goes from this big ape of, behemoth of a problem to, what can I do right now? And the mindset swivels 180 degrees straight away.
Solution thinking.
Yeah.
So have you got a method or a way that, in terms of the work that you've done, that we can start to think about, how do we do this? How do we...
Well, in the words of Blue Peter, here's one I made earlier. For those who are
Anybody think we'd actually planned that, Dave?
So for those who are listening rather than reading, I'm holding up a piece of paper, and I've drawn a dirty, great big cross in the middle of the page, from top to bottom and from left to right.
Horizontal and vertical cross,
Yeah.
not two diagonal crosses. Yeah.
So that's right. So I've split the page into 4 quarters or quadrants. Now, in the top left box, I've written the word me. So what is the problem, and is it something I can deal with and control? I.e., is it me that's going to sort this? Maybe it's me, but not yet, because other things need to happen. Or circumstances, I need approval, I need permission, I need a license.
So is the top box here me now?
Me
I can
now,
deal with this, yeah?
me now, yeah. I can do it, and I can do it now. Or it is me, but not yet, in which case, what's got to happen before you do it? If not me, who? Who's responsible, or who's going to do it? And then take some delegation steps to make sure they do it. Or I can't do it, or it doesn't need doing, in which case, let it go. Literally, just let it go. And here's something you can try, okay? If you're having trouble, how can you just let go of worry, Dave? Well, worry, if you're honest with yourself, causes a physical tension in your body. So if you accept where that tension is, and use your fantastic creative mind to imagine moving wherever it is in the body, into your shoulder, down your arm, through your forearm, put it through your hand, and put the problem into the pen that you're holding, and grip the pen tightly. This is like displacement, okay? So you're taking that tension and you put it in the pen that you're gripping in your hand, and you grip the pen really tightly. And after a few seconds, it feels like there's a lump on the end of your wrist. You can't tell where the hand ends and the pen begins. And all you need to do is say, could I let that go? Well, yeah, I could. If you could let it go, would you let it go? Yeah, I would. When? Now. Take a deep breath in, hold it for a second, and as you let go, relax. And let go of that pen. Now, you might go, that's ridiculous, Dave.
That's psychobabble, Dave. What are you talking about, mate?
Try it. I dare you, try it. Score your worrier from 0 to 10, 10 being the tsunami of worry, and 0 to 10. Score it at the beginning, score it afterwards. It goes down. Do it again. It goes down again. It's taking control of the way you think, the way you feel, the way you behave, and it removes the physical stress. The worry, that's bad, but if you allow it to become physical, that is terrible, guys. We need to take control of that.
Well, we know, don't we, again, in our sector, in the agricultural sector in the UK and probably all around the world, stress is a major cause of mental health issues and mental well-being issues. And whilst, again, this might sound like we're giving you a bit of psychobabble and a bit of fluffy stuff to work with, there is stacks of brain science behind what Dave's just said in terms of the way the brain can work. And we can train the brain, something called neuroplasticity. We can actually change the way the brain actually thinks.
He's read a book. You've been reading books again, haven't you?
I've been swallowing dictionaries, yeah.
You're reading books.
Some of those things, though, these are the things that we've studied, and certainly I've studied as part of my business, is the mindset piece, the way the brain works, is so important. And that little technique that Dave just gave you and described, if you weren't watching it on the camera and you're listening back to it, you listen back to it again and visualize what Dave was doing, taking all that worry into his hand, and then when he let it go, the brain will just go, oh, you've let it go then. It doesn't understand the difference between reality and what our imagination is telling us. So we can imagine something away. That's the power of our brains. We can imagine worry away. We can't physically take away the circumstances. And again, let's understand, we appreciate that sometimes there are really big things in life that cause us a huge amount of worry. The issue is, are you sweating the small stuff?
Yeah.
Is it the lots of little things that's mounting up? And those are the ones we're saying we need to get rid of. You know, if you've got something really major, huge going on, you may need to get some help, some therapy, some counselling. We would certainly signpost you to do so. Lots of great organisations, again, within the farming community that can help you with your worry. What we're talking about today really are some of those little niggles that just mount up. Can we just let those go? Is it something I've got to do? Is it something I can do, but I've got to wait until I've got a bit more information or a bit more time? Is it something that somebody else can sort out? In which case, do I just delegate it? Or is it in that really beastly quadrant of, do you know what? Why am I sweating about this? It's either out of my control, I can't do anything about it. You actually cannot control the weather. Did you know that, Dave? You can't control the weather.
I tried once.
Yeah, it doesn't work, does it?
Doesn't work.
And yet we can really get ourselves wound up about the fact that I can't go and cut my silage today because it's raining again. Why don't we just let go of that and think, what can I do next? Can I go and, is it tomorrow? Is the forecast better tomorrow? That's the key about letting go of some of these worries.
100%. So stop catastrophizing. Work with what is true. Work with what is true. And if you're going to catastrophize, remember, you've got to, in equal measure, think positive. Otherwise, how's it working as a plan? So guys, deal with your worry. Don't let it become a physical thing, and take care of yourselves. See you on another drill down.